right, we have two readings today. The first one is number 558 in the Gray Hymnal, For Everything a Season. For everything there is a season, and a time for every matter under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to pluck up what is planted, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to break down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to throw away stones and a time to gather stones together, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to seek and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to throw away, a time to tear and a time to sow, a time to keep silence and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time of war and a time for peace. This poem, Farm Market, was written by Pearl Tibbets Sawyer, poet, sage, and longtime member, now deceased, of the First Universalist Church in Auburn, Maine, the Reverend Charlotte's ordaining congregation. Seeding is believing. An eloquent testimonial hangs from the wall in this place of faith. Walk reverently on this concrete floor past abundant piles of this area's pride, her sweet corn, most gently prized for its fleeting tenure. With the little wire basket hanging from your arm, cruise the periphery of the bins, green and wax beans coexisting like fraternal twins next to the chard and beet greens, the broccoli and cauliflower. Our own, the farmer boasts, these products of sweat and back-breaking endurance. Eggplant, gleaming black, vies for attention next to a mountain of pickling cukes. And nearby, the perennial plenty of zucchini nudges the modest simplicity of potatoes, honored most by the plenitude of them. Capping it all, tomatoes and peppers gleam like Christmas tree bulbs, crimson and green and brilliant yellow. Smile and be at peace amidst the profusion. This is an oasis in the arid desert of chaotic times, reminding us that life does and will continue for all who have faith to let it. Seeding is believing, and perhaps believing is seeding. How beautiful the chart is today.
Autumn is a time of transition. Saffron trees capture the colors of fire. Memories of warm summer days inspire hope to sustain us through the colder months ahead. Our hearts will rest in the grace of imaginings about the future. Most of the people I know who plant gardens do their planning during the depths of winter, when the seed catalogs start arriving in their mailboxes. Seeds will not get sown until the spring equinox 4 months from now, and then at more northerly latitudes only under special grow lights, in seed flats placed by sunny windows or in hoop houses. But if you think about it, nature sows her seeds now, at the end of summer and in the fall, carried by winds and birds and mammals, fertilized and protected by decaying organic matter, watered by passing autumn rainstorms. These seeds begin their life cycle in autumn. Before I get going on how this sermon grew in me, I cannot help but note two completely unrelated tidbits. The first is that today is the first Sunday of Advent, the month leading up to Christmas, which celebrates the birth of Jesus. In the Christian calendar, this Sunday is the start of the new liturgical year. The second is that the Unitarian Universalist Service Committee, or UUSC, chose as their theme for this year's Guest at Your Table, GAYT, fundraising program, Plant Seeds of Justice. What can I say? It's a time-honored metaphor. And if you don't know about the UUSC and its annual Guest at Your Table effort, I'd be happy to chat with you and answer questions during the fellowship hour after the service. It seems that throughout this quarter of the solar year, there is some kind of New Year celebration in many of the world's spiritual and religious traditions. Now, what originally sparked my musings for this service was a sermon that exegeted, or interpreted, Jesus' parable of the sower found in the New Testament in Matthew 13, Mark 4, and Luke chapters 8 and 13. There are several parts to the parable of the sower, one of which is also known as the parable of the four soils. This is where the results of scattering seeds along a path where birds eat them, or on rocky ground where sufficient roots cannot take hold, or among thorns that overshadowed the seedlings so that they cannot mature, or in good, rich, dark, and fertile soil, serve as metaphors for where the Word of God does and does not take hold and flourish. In Matthew 13, a second parable follows on the heels of the four soils. In this parable, good weed seed is sown in the field, and the owner's enemy comes along while the man's field hands slept and sows the seed of weeds among the wheat. The owner instructs them to wait until harvest time to cut first the weeds and then the wheat. I hope my diction is getting through here this morning. It's hard to say weeds and wheat without getting them confused. And oftentimes I think we get confused about what's weeds and what's wheat. Now, my thoughts went off in a slightly different direction that morning in July of 2013 while I listened to that particular sermon. I had been to General Assembly in Louisville, Kentucky, and heard outgoing moderator Ginny Corder charge the assembled delegates to take responsibility for the power that we have because our ecclesiology is congregational polity. Ginny reminded the GA in her last report as moderator that we, the people, set the vision, which must reflect the long view, a view that is at least 10 times longer than any 5-year strategic plan or the length of any term of elected leadership in our association. Ginny held up the discomfiting facts that all of the many initiatives that the denomination embarked on during her nearly 2 decades of service at the national level have failed. But she was clear that those failures were because they have simply come and gone. Ginny told the General Assembly, we don't even know whether or not they were effective. We just know they weren't what the next group of leaders wanted to do. That July, I was looking ahead to another trip to Scotland in August, thanks to receiving some financial help from my spiritual teachers there, as well as looking forward to my move to Binghamton, New York, and my ministerial internship there at UUCB. At that time, I knew that the year ahead would sow seeds for future harvest, just as every spiritual retreat or pilgrimage that I go on does. In fact, like you here at Cedarhurst UU, I'm at a similar inflection point that requires planning for the future. I'll have more to say about this later in my reflections. The direction that I went with the parable of the sower a dozen years ago, as well as now, has more to do with the timing of our sowing. When, as well as where, we sow the seeds matters. And we do not always see the growth of or relationship to what we have planted and those seeds that were sown until we make the harvest. Well, as a Midwestern gal, that got me thinking about winter wheat. Winter wheat is the kind that is made into bread flours because of the high gluten content. And for those who are gluten intolerant, please feel free to find an analogous grain, if possible, and let me know what it is. But sticking to the hard wheat varieties for now, I find winter wheat a compelling metaphor for the direction of my thoughts. Bread is a time-honored metaphor for community, for giving thanks, for expressing our gratitude to the earth and the bounty of harvests. Just in case you are not familiar with it, let me tell you a bit more about winter wheat. Due to the timing of the plant's growth and maturation, winter wheat is valued as a cold crop that can be planted right after the harvest in the fall. Out on the prairies and across the Great Plains, dryland farmers are planting their wheat crop between September and December. In Minnesota, my home state, September is the month of planting, and the prime week for sowing depends on where you are relative to the east-west interstate highways of I-90 and I-94, which divide the state into three parts, north to south. I-90 is the southern one, I-94 is the northern one. By September's end, the winter wheat seeds have been sown for future harvest. Winter wheat sprouts before freezing occurs, then becomes dormant until the soil warms in the spring. Winter wheat needs a few weeks of cold before being able to flower. However, persistent snow cover might be disadvantageous. They're getting a little snow this weekend. This is dryland farming, which means that irrigation systems are not in use. Therefore, the farmer takes advantage of and must respond to precipitation when it falls. Too much or too little rain or snow at the wrong time can cause crop failure. Harvesting occurs between May and July. The harvesters are migrant farm workers, some of them immigrants or guest workers from other countries, operating huge combines starting in the southern Great Plains of Oklahoma, moving northward through Kansas as the grain ripens, and finishing in the Dakotas. You can understand why our farmers are anxious about this year. For everything there is a season and a time for every purpose under heaven, a time to plant and a time to reap. We commonly think of sowing seeds in the spring, but the reality of natural cycles is that seeds are planted when they fall to the ground during the autumn, when the plant dies back or the fruit rots, turning into the natural cycles at all scales, quantum to cosmic, is critical to growth and change. or evolution. It makes sense to me to sow the seeds that are the stuff of the staff of life in the autumn time of the year. This is the cycle of nature. Now, how can we apply winter wheat as a metaphor to our lives as individuals? How about as a congregation that worships communally and works together to bend the arc of history towards justice? And what about global community? One of the things that UUA moderator Ginny Courtier was telling us in the 2013 Louisville General Assembly is that when you plant seeds, you have to be both patient and attentive. We must use our power to nurture and to discern growth, be that growth in membership, growth in connections to or service with those outside of our field of view, or personal and collective spiritual growth. Let's consider some ways that sowing seeds for future harvest applies to individual people's lives. Maybe you want to engage in yoga or dry your own food. Maybe you are trying to find out more and new ways to decrease your carbon footprint. Maybe you are trying to be mindful about asking if it's okay before you touch or hug someone. Take, for example, any discipline. This could be an exercise regimen, a healthy diet, or a spiritual practice. When you start any of these disciplines, it surely isn't an easy row to hoe. The ground is hard. There are old habits or patterns to break. The most important attitudes to hold as you practice are commitment and devotion. Stick to it, and it gets easier. It gets better. Love what you're doing. It will reward you. Whether you are aware of it or not, new seeds are being sown for future harvest. With respect to daily prayer and meditation, Marianne Williamson put it this way in Illuminata, A Return to Prayer. Were the majority of Americans at school, at homes, and in businesses to take 1 minute each morning to commune together in silence, contemplating our higher power, this country would transform. The inner life is like a garden we haven't really thought of planting, which will bear all the fruit we could ever want once we think to tend to its needs. End quote. As the UU congregation of Binghamton's Reverend Douglas Taylor emphasized in his 2013 Gould lecture, it starts here in our own hearts. It starts here with each one of our lives, but it doesn't stay here. The Spirit must move. Our interconnectedness results in others feeling and benefiting from our individual efforts. It's the butterfly effect. In that sense, Spirit is always moving out from the individual. But there is another way this works as well. No matter how much work we do for ourselves on our own, we don't know the results until we are in relationship with others. The planted seeds bloom in the garden of community. Healing happens in community. We sow seeds for future harvest in community. We grow the grain for our community's bread. As a congregation, through the work of leaders and committees, we prepare the soil, we plant, we weed, we water, we grow and mature people and programs. Winter wheat and sowing seeds for future harvest is the lens that I have been looking through during the past year as I have navigated changes and transitions in my own life and in the world at large. Likewise, every committee, program, and small group here at Cedarhurst UU is planting seeds. This congregation is deeply engaged in outreach and justice work. You have recently celebrated your 40th anniversary and are actively envisioning your next 4 decades, including your exciting building upgrades, renovations, and expansions. And I just loved all the joy and smiles at this window this morning, which I had no idea was going to be part of the service. This congregation is changing and evolving and will be planting new seeds this year and in the years to come. It is important to keep planning and keep dreaming, no matter what. Let me return to moderator Jenny Courtier's messaging about the importance of holding a vision. Addressing the General Assembly in her moderator's report, Jenny Courtier said, "You heard earlier, without a vision, the people perish. But it's because the people aren't visioning, not because no one gave them something. Without a vision, the people perish because they are no longer active in their own future." End quote. The vision must come from the people because the people have the power under congregational polity. The vision is a much longer view than the terms of elected officers or a 5-year plan. Hold on to your vision for the future of Cedarhurst Unitarian Universalists. It will be the job of Cedarhurst UU's elected officers to oversee implementation of the strategic plan as envisioned by the congregation. But without motivated leaders, these initiatives will fall on rocky ground or be gobbled up by hungry birds. Identify, nurture, and support members to become the best leaders they can be. They will be tilling the soil that is the human capital of this congregation. Leading is not solely the domain of elected officers and committees. Service is the life of this congregation. Service is a fabulous form of leading by doing. It is a gift of time and talent. It is also a good ground for ripening personal fulfillment and nurturing the evolving self. Indeed, at the heart of all of this is growth, membership growth as well as personal spiritual transformation. Membership and stewardship programs are geared towards nurturing and supporting a healthy and bountiful congregational community. Being a good steward of any garden involves amending the soil. Think compost. Sowing the seeds and tending to the plants, and within the cycle of the year, harvesting the bounty. What seeds were planted when you first visited this congregation? How might you now harvest what grew in you so that the next generation of seeds gets sown? Please consider these and other questions related to the meaning of membership and what you might be able to offer in terms of time and talent to this community garden that you are growing in. Some would consider communal worship the heart of congregational life. Like a sundial at the center of a garden, it serves as a point of reference. It starts here, but it cannot stay here. The Spirit must move. It moves into the wider community through the ways that we live out our mission. What we do within our own selves and within the walls of our bricks and mortar church plants seeds for future harvest, feeding others' spirits through our involvement in community. There are many varieties of seeds you are sowing through your acts of justice and compassion. Keep planning. Keep dreaming. It matters what we plant, where we plant it, and when we plant it. Pearl Sawyer of blessed memory, got it right at the end of her poem, Farm Market. Smile and be at peace amidst the profusion. This is an oasis in the arid desert of chaotic times, reminding us that life does and will continue for all who have faith to let it. Seeding is believing, and perhaps believing is seeding. Paraphrasing Margaret Kuyp's desert prayer, hidden among our daily experiences as people in faithful community are tiny seeds at rest and waiting, dormant yet undefeated. Like the seeds of winter wheat planted before the ground freezes hard, our seeds endure. Moistened by our time and talents, our seeds will send down roots, grow hardy, and bloom. May we believe in those seeds and in the seeds within us. May we remember in our dry seasons that we all hold the seeds that ripen into the staff of life, the bread of this community. It is said that it is the deep nourishment of winter that allows the seed to burst forth in spring. This is the time to collect deep nourishment. Imagine yourself now. Tune into the trees, measuring the weight of snowfall, if we get any, which tells it how much energy it will need for the year ahead. Let us hold up for ourselves an image of George Washington Carver, who we learned about during the wisdom story this morning. He was a trailblazer, a visionary, and an exemplar of how we too can sow seeds for bountiful future harvests. Carver understood the importance of restoring the soil's nutrients, enriching it, and producing additional crops that provided additional income and resources. He knew also that everyone should have access to learning and be treated fairly. George Washington Carver was also an artist. He was a devout man of faith and a dedicated scientist who paved the way for those who came after. Let us each go about our days and years sowing seeds for future harvest in ourselves, in our homes, in our congregation, our municipalities, in this nation, in the world,